Okay, so someone sent us this article, and, well, the title kind of threw us for a loop.
Yeah, hot girls at bars.
Right. It definitely caught our attention.
I'll say.
But then we saw this term, chim moi, and we were like, wait, what?
It does make you wonder.
What exactly is going on in Vietnamese nightlife? So is this like some kind of undercover expose?
Not exactly. It's more of a, social commentary. And you won't believe where it's from.
Oh, lay it on us.
A Vietnamese agricultural newspaper.
Whoop. Really?
Yep. Not exactly the first place you'd expect to find, nightlife analysis.
That's for sure. I mean, it's like finding relationship advice in a car manual.
Haha. Yeah. But hey, maybe those farmers have some insights.
Maybe so. All right, so before we dive in, just a quick note to our listeners. This is all about understanding a phenomenon, not endorsing any activities.
Right, we're just exploring what we found here.
You're curious about this chim moi thing, and we're here to help you unpack it.
Exactly. So first things first, chim moi translates to decoy bird.
Decoy bird, like the kind hunters use.
Yep, those plastic ducks. Except in this case, the prey aren't birds, they're men with wallets.
Ah, okay. So these women, they're not, let's say, directly involved
Right. They act more like a high-end lure.
to encourage spending at the bars.
You got it.
So they're kind of like the fancy version of those buy one, get one free
Yeah.
deals.
Haha. Yeah, I guess you could say that.
You get lured in by the promise of something shiny, and then bam, you've blown your whole paycheck.
That's a pretty good analogy. And speaking of different approaches, the article highlights two main types of chim moi.
Oh.
Tell me more. There are those who are professionally trained by agencies.
Wow. So like modeling with a twist.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are the informal groups.
So like friends working together.
Right.
I guess there's safety in numbers, right?
Could be.
But all this raises a question.
What's that?
How organized is all this? Is it a full-blown industry or more of an open secret?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The article doesn't give a definitive answer. Huh. Well, one thing the article does make clear is that these decoy birds, they're making banks.
They are. Some earn $300 to $500 a week. And superstars, like, for life,
She's raking it in, isn't she?
up to $1,000.
Wow. More than some office jobs.
It really shows you the economic value they bring to those bars.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly they're driving revenue.
They are. And this high pay also suggests something else.
What's that?
Fierce competition, both among the chim moi themselves and the venues vying to attract them.
The good old laws of supply and demand at work.
Exactly. And when we zoom out, this whole chim moi thing gives us a peek into Vietnam's nightlife economy.
Right. It's like a microcosm of a much bigger picture.
And it highlights how these women, whatever you want to call them, wield significant influence in this world.
That's for sure. Okay, but how do they actually do it? Is it all looks or is there something more?
Well, the article talks about kuso.
Kuso.
It's a tricky term, kind of vague, open to interpretation.
Okay, so like a dress code at a fancy club.
Yeah, something like that. And that's where it gets interesting.
Because
Well, it's not clearly defined.
so we're left wondering what skills these women are really using.
Exactly. But it does suggest they're more than just pretty faces.
They need to be smart, engaging, and I'm guessing good at reading a room
Definitely. And remember, all this is happening in a nightlife environment
where the lines can get blurry.
very quickly.
The article mentions one Chim Moi noticed the men losing interest if she wasn't wearing perfume.
Ah, the power of scent.
Right. So it's not just visual, it's about creating a whole experience.
Exactly. A lasting impression, even after the club lights come on and the hangover hits.
Wow, that's some next level strategy. Like
Yeah.
those old perfume ads.
Promising you'll be irresistible.
If you wear their fragrance.
Exactly. It's all about selling a fantasy.
Speaking of fantasies, the article mentions some Chim Moi use, let's say, more creative tactics.
There's a story about a woman who had a, shall we say, wardrobe malfunction.
Oh, an accidental slip.
You got it.
I have a feeling that accident was carefully calculated. But makes you wonder.
Off the woman's perspective.
Right. Was she comfortable with that level of exposure, or was it a risk she felt she had to take?
That's the key question the article doesn't answer. We're getting a very one-sided view here.
It's like trying to judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. We're missing the full story.
It's almost like the article itself is using the Chim Moi tactic,
Oh, how so?
highlighting the allure but leaving out the women's voices.
Right. We're left wondering what they think about all of this.
Are they making empowered choices, or are there pressures we're not seeing?
Exactly. It's a good reminder to be critical of our sources.
Who's telling the story and whose voices are missing?
Absolutely.
Speaking of missing voices, we do hear about this Chimoy superstar, Taolai.
Ah, yes, Tale.
Apparently, she's so good she was offered $1,000 a week by a fancy restaurant.
That's right. She's turned this into a real business.
It highlights the entrepreneurial side of all this. She's built a brand and she's leveraging it.
Exactly. Like any skilled profession, the best get paid the most.
And in this case, Taolai is the Beyoncé of the Chimoy world.
That's one way to put it. And it's not just about looks. The article says she brings a certain energy, a vibrancy to the places she works.
So she's not just attracting individual customers, she's elevating the whole atmosphere.
Exactly. She's like the human equivalent of a disco ball.
Everyone wants to be around her sparkle.
And that's where the decoy bird metaphor comes full circle.
How so?
She's not just there to be looked at. She's creating a scene, an experience, drawing in the crowds.
So she's like the ultimate party starter.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you could say that. Her success raises some interesting questions.
About ambition, entrepreneurship.
And what it takes to thrive in this world.
Okay, so we've got this high-earning Chimoy superstar.
Right.
But now I'm wondering about the cost of this success. Is this a story of empowerment, or is there a darker side to this decoy bird game?
That's a great question, and we'll dive into that right after the break.
Stay with us. Yeah, is it all glitz and glamour, or are there shadows lurking behind the scenes?
Well, that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Right. It's like peeking behind the curtain of a really exclusive club.
Exactly, and trying to figure out, is it really as glamorous as it seems?
Are these women really in control, or are they, playing by someone else's rules?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the article doesn't exactly give us a straight answer.
It definitely raises more questions than it answers.
It does. I mean, we're only getting a glimpse into this world.
Right, and it's a very specific perspective.
The male gaze, basically.
Yeah, like we're seeing the Chimoy through the eyes of the men they're attracting.
Exactly. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. We need to be aware of whose voices are being amplified and whose are being silenced.
Couldn't agree more. And that makes it even more important to consider the potential risks involved.
Right. I mean, the article kind of glosses over that.
It does. We don't hear much about the pressure these women might face, the emotional toll it could take.
Or the dangers they might encounter.
Exactly. We're kind of left to fill in the blanks ourselves.
Which is honestly a little unsettling.
It is. It's like we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle.
The human side of the story.
Exactly. And without that, it's impossible to form a complete picture.
Right. I mean, we can speculate all we want, but ultimately we need to hear from the women themselves.
Absolutely. Their stories, their experiences, that's what would really shed light on this whole phenomenon.
It would give us a much more nuanced understanding of the complexities involved.
And maybe help us answer that big question, empowerment or exploitation?
Exactly. Because right now, it's all a bit of mystery.
It is, but that's what makes it so intriguing.
It definitely makes you want to dig deeper to find out more.
To see beyond the surface and really understand what's going on.
So what can our listeners do if they're as fascinated by this as we are?
Well, I'd encourage them to do their own research, to look for articles or stories from the women's perspective.
Right. Because there's always more to the story than meets the eye.
And sometimes the most valuable insights come from the voices we don't often hear.
Absolutely. So go out there, explore, and see what you can uncover.
You might be surprised by what you find.
That's for sure. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be able to have some of these Chimoy on the show to share their stories firsthand.
Now, that would be a fascinating deep dive.
It would. But until then, we'll keep digging, keep questioning, and keep bringing you the stories that matter.
Because that's what we do.
That's right. So stay tuned for more deep dives into the unknown.
See you next time.
So we've got this whole spectrum, right? Like on one end, you've got these women making good money, maybe even enjoying themselves.
Right, using their skills to get ahead.
But then there's that other side, the potential downsides, the risks we don't really get to see in the article.
Yeah, like, are they truly calling the shots or are there strings attached?
Exactly. It's like, how much freedom do they really have in this whole Chimoy setup?
That's the question, isn't it? And honestly, it's hard to say for sure without knowing more about the context, about Vietnamese society.
Right, because their culture, their values, those play a role too.
Absolutely. And we can't just impose our own Western ideas on this situation.
Yeah. We have to be careful not to jump to conclusions.
It's all too easy to see things through our own cultural lens, to make assumptions based on our own experiences.
And that's why it's so crucial to hear from the women themselves, to get their perspective.
Couldn't agree more. Their voices are the missing piece of this puzzle.
Like, imagine if we could sit down with Thalai, with some of the other Chimoy mentioned in the article.
That would be amazing to hear their stories firsthand, to understand what motivates them, what challenges they face.
Right, like, do they feel empowered by this work, or is it more complicated than that?
That's what I'm curious about. It's probably not a simple black and white situation.
Definitely not. There are probably layers of nuance, different perspectives within the Chimoy community itself.
And until we hear those voices, we're only getting a partial view.
So for our listeners out there, if you're interested in this topic, we encourage you to do some digging of your own.
Yeah, look beyond the headlines. See if you can find articles or blog posts or anything from the women's perspective.
It's all about broadening our understanding, challenging our assumptions.
And maybe even uncovering some unexpected truths.
Because ultimately, that's what a good deep dive is all about.
Exactly. It's about asking questions, exploring different angles, and being open to learning something new.
And sometimes, the most valuable insights come from the most unexpected places.
Like a Vietnamese agricultural newspaper.
Exactly. You never know where the next deep dive will take us.
So stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next adventure.
Keep those minds curious, folks.